white, yellow, and red. Apuleius describes her as follows: in the first place, then, her most copious and long hairs, being gradually intorted, and promiscuously scattered on her divine neck, were softly defluous. A multiform crown, consisting of various flowers, bound the sublime summit of her head. And in the middle of the crown, just on her forehead, there was a smooth orb resembling a mirror, or rather a white refulgent light, which indicated that she was the moon. Vipers rising up after the manner of furrows, environed the crown on the right hand and on the left, and cerealian ears of corn were also extended from above. Her garment was of many colors, and woven from the finest flax, and was at one time lucid with a white splendor, at another yellowed from the flower of crocus, and at another flaming with a rosy redness. But that which most excessively dazzled my sight, was a very black robe, fulgid with a dark splendor, and which, spreading round and passing under her right side, and ascending to her left shoulder, there rose protuberant like the centre of a shield, the dependent part of the robe falling in many folds, and having small knots of fringe, gracefully flowing in its extremities. Glittering stars were dispersed through the embroidered border of the robe, and through the whole of its surface, and the full moon, shining in the middle of the stars, breathed forth flaming fires. Nevertheless, a crown, wholly consisting of flowers and fruits of every kind, adhered with indivisible connection to the border of that conspicuous robe, in all its undulating motions. What she carried in her hands also consisted of things of a very different nature. For her right hand, indeed, bore a brazen rattle sistrum, through the narrow lamina of which, bent like a belt, certain rods passing, produced a sharp triple sound. Through the vibrating motion of her arm, an oblong vessel, in the shape of a boat, depended from her left hand, on the handle of which, in that part in which it was conspicuous, an asp raised its erect head and largely swelling neck. And shoes woven from the leaves of the victorious palm tree covered her immortal feet. The green color alludes to the vegetation which covers the face of the earth, and therefore represents the robe of nature. The black represents death and corruption as being the way to a new life and generation. Except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. John E. 3. White, yellow, and red signify the three principal colors of the alchemical, hermetical, universal medicine after the blackness of its putrefaction is over. The ancients gave the name Isis to one of their occult medicines. Therefore the description here given relates somewhat to chemistry. Her black drape also signifies that the moon, or the lunar humidity, the sophic universal mercury and the operating substance of nature in alchemical terminology, has no light of its own, but receives its light, its fire, and its vitalizing force from the sun. Isis was the image or representative of the great works of the wise men, the philosopher's stone, the elixir of life, and the universal medicine. Insert. The sistrum. The sistrum is designed to represent to us, that everything must be kept in continual agitation, and never cease from motion. That they ought to be mused and well shaken, whenever they begin to grow drowsy as it were, and to droop in their motion. For, say they, the sound of these sistra averts and drives away typho. Meaning hereby, that as corruption clogs and puts a stop to the regular course of nature, so generation, by the means of motion, loosens it again, and restores it to its former vigor. Now the outer surface of this instrument is of a convex figure, as within its circumference are contained those four cords or bars, only three shown, which make such a rattling when they are shaken, nor is this without its meaning. For that part of the universe which is subject to generation and corruption is contained within the sphere of the moon. And whatever motions or changes may happen therein, they are all affected by the different combinations of the four elementary bodies, fire, earth, water, and air. Moreover, upon the upper part of the convex surface of the sistrum is carved the effigies of a cat with a human visage, as on the lower edge of it, under those moving cords, is engraved on the one side the face of Isis, and on the other that of Nephthys, by the faces symbolically representing generation and corruption, which, as has been already observed, is nothing but the motion and alteration of the four elements one amongst another. Continued. Other hieroglyphics seen in connection with Isis are no less curious than those already described, but it is impossible to enumerate all, for many symbols were used interchangeably by the Egyptian Hermetists. The goddess often wore upon her head a hat made of cypress branches, to signify mourning for her dead husband and also for the physical death which she caused every creature to undergo in order to receive a new life in posterity or a periodic resurrection. The head of Isis is sometimes ornamented with a crown of gold or a garland of olive leaves, as conspicuous marks of her sovereignty as queen of the world and mistress of the entire universe. The crown of gold signifies also the aurific unctuosity or sulphurous fatness of the solar and vital fires which she dispenses to every individual by a continual circulation of the elements, this circulation being symbolized by the musical rattle which she carries in her hand. This sistrum is also the Ionic symbol of purity. A serpent interwoven among the olive leaves on her head, devouring its own tail, denotes that the aurific unctuosity was soiled with the venom of terrestrial corruption which surrounded it and must be mortified and purified by 7 planetary circulations or purifications called flying eagles alchemical terminology in order to make it medicinal for the restoration of health. Here the emanations from the sun are recognized as a medicine for the healing of human ills. The 7 planetary circulations are represented by the circumambulations of the Masonic Lodge, by the marching of the Jewish priests 7 times around the walls of Jericho, and of the Mohammedan priests 7 times around the Kaaba at Mecca. From the crown of gold project 3 horns of plenty, signifying the abundance of the gifts of nature proceeding from one root having its origin in the heavens head of Isis. In this figure the pagan naturalists represent all the vital powers of the 3 kingdoms and families of sublunary nature mineral, plant, and animal man considered as an animal. At one of her ears was the moon, at the other the sun, to indicate that these 2 were the agent and patient, or father and mother principles of all natural objects, and that Isis, or nature, makes use of these 2 luminaries to communicate her powers to the whole empire of animals, vegetables, and minerals. On the back of her neck were the characters of the planets and the signs of the zodiac which assisted the planets in their functions. This signified that the heavenly influences directed the destinies of the principles and sperms of all things, because they were the governors of all sublunary bodies, which they transformed into little worlds made in the image of the greater universe. Isis holds in her right hand a small sailing ship with the spindle of a spinning wheel for its mast. From the top of the mast projects a water jug, its handle shaped like a serpent swelled with venom. This indicates that Isis steers the bark of life, full of troubles and miseries, on the stormy ocean of time. The spindle symbolizes the fact that she spins and cuts the thread of life. These emblems further signify that Isis abounds in humidity, by means of which she nourishes all natural bodies, preserving them from the heat of the sun by humidifying them with nutritious moisture from the atmosphere. Moisture supports vegetation, but this subtle humidity life ether is always more or less infected by some venom proceeding from corruption or decay. It must be purified by being brought into contact with the invisible cleansing fire of nature. This fire digests, perfects, and revitalizes the substance, in order that the humidity may become a universal medicine to heal and renew all the bodies in nature. The serpent throws off its skin annually and is thereby renewed, symbolic of the resurrection of the spiritual life from the material nature. This renewal of the earth takes place every spring, when the vivifying spirit of the sun returns to the countries of the northern hemisphere. The symbolic virgin carries in her left hand a sistrum and a symbol, or square frame of metal, which when struck gives the keynote of nature Fa. Sometimes also an olive branch, to indicate the harmony she preserves among natural things with her regenerating power. By the processes of death and corruption she gives life to a number of creatures of diverse forms through periods of perpetual change. The symbol is made square instead of the usual triangular shape in order to symbolize that all things are transmuted and regenerated according to the harmony of the 4 elements. Dr. Sigismund Backstrom believed that if a physician could establish harmony among the elements of earth, fire, air, and water, and unite them into a stone, the philosopher's stone symbolized by the 6-pointed star or 2 interlaced triangles, he would possess the means of healing all disease. Dr. Backstrom further stated that there was no doubt in his mind that the universal, omnipresent fire spirit of nature does all and is all in all. By attraction, repulsion, motion, heat, sublimation, evaporation, exsication, inspissation, coagulation, and fixation. The universal fire spirit manipulates matter, and manifests throughout creation.